The fires had been burning for 3 days across the colony world of Serath 7. Ambassador Kelris stood in the ruins of what had once been the central communication hub of his people. His tall, slender body trembled as he looked out at the destruction around him. The Volanthi were a peaceful species with translucent skin that changed colors based on their emotions. Right now, his skin was the deep purple of despair. The Kresh Dominion had arrived without any warning. Their massive warships had filled the sky like a swarm of metal insects, blocking out the sun and bringing death to everything below. The Kresh were conquerors who had spent 800 years taking whatever they wanted from weaker species. They viewed the Volanthi as nothing more than future slaves for their mining operations across the galaxy. Kelris pressed his four-fingered hands against the damaged control panel. The system flickered to life, barely functional after the bombardments. He knew what he had to do. He began entering the final distress code that his people possessed. It was a galactic SOS signal, reserved only for the most desperate situations when a species faced complete destruction. Elder Morath walked slowly toward him. She was old, her once bright and luminous skin now dim with exhaustion and grief. She had led the Volanthi Council for 40 years and had never seen anything like this nightmare. "What are you doing, Kelris?" she asked softly. "I am sending out a call for help," he replied, "to every corner of explored space. Someone must hear us. Someone must come." Morath placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Her colors shifted to the gray of hopelessness. "No one will come, my friend. The Galactic Council declared neutrality the moment the Kresh attacked. The Torvax Confederacy is too afraid to challenge the Dominion. The Nethuri Collective pretends we do not exist. We have sent messages to every major power in the galaxy, and all of them have turned away." Kelris finished entering the code and pressed the transmission button. The signal shot out into space, traveling at the speed of light in every direction. "Then perhaps someone minor will answer. Anyone. I refuse to let our people die in silence." Outside the ruined building, the sounds of explosions continued. The Kresh ground forces were advancing through the city, rounding up survivors and loading them onto transport ships. Those who resisted were killed on the spot. Those who surrendered faced a future of slavery in the deep mines of Kresh territory, where the average life expectancy was less than 5 years. The communication array crackled with static. Kelris and Morath both froze. A response was coming through, but the signal was strange. It used primitive radio waves that most advanced civilizations had abandoned centuries ago. The voice that came through was rough and direct. "Distress signal received. Human expeditionary fleet en route. Hold your position. Help is coming." Kelris felt his blood turn cold. His skin shifted to the pale white of fear. Morath took a step backward, her eyes wide. "Humans," she whispered. "The Deathworlders." Every species in the galaxy knew about the humans. They had emerged from a planet called Earth, a world that most scientists considered barely habitable. The gravity was crushing compared to most homeworlds. The atmosphere contained a highly reactive gas called oxygen that was poisonous to many species. The planet experienced extreme weather patterns, from freezing cold to burning heat. Radiation from their sun bombarded the surface constantly, and yet somehow life had evolved there. Not just any life, but intelligent life that had clawed its way to the top of the food chain by being more aggressive, more adaptable, and more stubborn than anything else on that nightmare world. The humans consumed the flesh of other creatures for nutrition. They breathed the corrosive atmosphere without any protective equipment. They could survive injuries that would kill most other sentient beings. The Galactic Council had quietly hoped that humanity would destroy itself before becoming a problem. They had fought countless wars among themselves and had developed weapons capable of rendering their own planet uninhabitable. But somehow, against all odds, they had survived. They had reached space, and now they were spreading outward, making everyone nervous. "Why would the humans help us?" Morath asked. "We have never had contact with them. We mean nothing to them." Kelris shook his head slowly. "I do not know. Perhaps they want something from us. Perhaps they see an opportunity to expand their influence. Perhaps they are simply mad." A young Valanthi soldier ran into the room. His name was Torin, and he had been defending the outer perimeter with the few weapons they had left. His skin was the bright red of urgent alarm. "Ambassador, the Kresh are breaking through the northern barrier. We cannot hold them much longer. We need to evacuate to the underground shelters." Kelris looked at the communication panel one more time. The human message repeated on a loop, the same words over and over. "Help is coming." He did not know if he could trust it. He did not know what the humans truly wanted. But at this moment, they were the only ones in the entire galaxy who had answered. "Tell our people to hold on," Kelris said to Torin. "Tell them that help is coming." "From where?" the young soldier asked desperately. "From Earth. The humans are sending ships." Torin's colors shifted through several emotions at once: fear, confusion, and something that might have been hope, all mixed together on his translucent skin. "The Deathworlders? Are you certain this is wise, Ambassador? The stories about them are terrifying. They say humans can survive wounds that would kill us 3 times over. They say humans hunt other creatures for sport. They say their homeworld is so dangerous that even the plants try to kill things." "All of that may be true," Kelris replied. "But right now, every other civilization in this galaxy has abandoned us. The Kresh are burning our cities and taking our children. If the monsters want to help us, then I will welcome the monsters with open arms." He walked toward the door, ready to join the evacuation. Morath followed close behind, her movements slow but determined. "And if they are worse than the Kresh?" she asked quietly. Kelris paused at the doorway. He looked up at the smoke-filled sky, at the Kresh warships hovering like dark clouds above his dying world. Another explosion shook the ground beneath his feet. "Then we are no worse off than we are now," he answered. "But I do not think they will be worse." Something in that message sounded different. Something in the way they spoke made me believe that they actually mean to help. Perhaps I am foolish. Perhaps this is nothing but desperate hope. But hope is all we have left now. They made their way through the burning streets toward the underground shelters. All around them, Valanthi refugees were running, carrying children, helping the elderly, trying to reach safety before the Kresh caught them. The air was thick with smoke and the smell of destruction. Kelris kept looking up at the stars, searching for any sign of approaching ships. The humans had said they were coming. He had no idea how long it would take or how many they would bring. He only knew that somewhere out there, beyond the darkness of space, a fleet of Deathworlders was racing toward his dying world. And for the first time in 3 days, he allowed himself to feel something other than despair. Commodore Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the carrier Relentless and watched the stars stretch into long lines as his fleet tore through hyperspace. The ship hummed with power beneath his feet, engines pushed to their absolute limits. Around him, the crew worked at their stations with quiet focus. These were men and women who had trained for years for moments exactly like this one. Harris was 52 years old with gray hair cut short and eyes that had seen too many battles. He had joined the Navy at 18 and had spent his entire adult life serving humanity among the stars. He had fought pirates in the outer colonies. He had defended mining stations from raiders. He had done things he was not proud of and things he would do again without hesitation. But this mission felt different. This was not about protecting human interests or expanding human territory. This was about saving people who had never asked anything of humanity before. "Time to arrival?" he asked without turning around. Lieutenant Commander Katie Moore checked her navigation console. She was young, barely 30, but she had one of the sharpest minds in the fleet. Her red hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her green eyes reflected the glow of her displays. 14 hours at current speed, sir. The engines are already running hot. Push them harder. Sir, if we burn out the drives before we arrive, we will not be able to help anyone. Harris finally turned to look at her. His expression was calm but firm. If we arrive too late, there will not be anyone left to help. Push them harder, Lieutenant Commander. That is an order. Moore nodded and began adjusting the engine output. The ship shuddered slightly as the drives increased their power. Harris knew they were taking a risk, but some risks were worth taking. The fleet consisted of 12 vessels in total. The carrier Relentless was the largest, home to 300 fighter craft and over 4,000 crew members. Behind it came 3 heavy cruisers named Defiance, Valor, and Thunder. These were the war horses of the human navy, built for sustained combat and heavy damage. 4 destroyers followed in a protective formation, their names less famous, but their crews no less brave. Finally, 4 fast attack frigates darted around the edges of the fleet, ready to scout ahead or strike quickly at vulnerable targets. Commander Lucas Grant walked across the bridge with a data pad in his hands. He was the fleet tactical officer, responsible for turning Harris's orders into actual battle plans. He was a tall man with dark skin and a serious expression that rarely changed regardless of the situation. "Intelligence update from the advanced drones," Grant said as he handed over the data pad. "The Kresh have committed a full invasion force, 32 capital ships confirmed, with over 100 support vessels, ground forces estimated at 2 million soldiers." Harris studied the numbers carefully. His face showed no emotion, but inside he felt the weight of what they were facing. The human fleet was outnumbered nearly 3-1 in capital ships alone. The math was not good. "Civilian population of Serath 7, he asked. "Approximately 800 million at the start of the invasion," Grant replied. "Current estimates suggest less than half remain alive. The Kresh have been conducting systematic bombardment of population centers." The bridge fell silent. Every person there understood what those words meant. 400 million people dead in 3 days. Entire cities reduced to ash, families torn apart, children killed without mercy. Harris thought about his daughter back on Earth. Her name was Emma, and she was 7 years old with her mother's dark hair and his stubborn personality. She was just starting elementary school, learning to read and write and dream about what she might become someday. The Valanthi children on Serath 7 had been doing the same thing a week ago. Now they were running for their lives or worse. "The Kresh are known for taking prisoners," Grant continued, "slave labor for their mining operations. The Valanthi who survived the bombardment will wish they had died with the others." Harris set down the data pad and looked out at the streaking stars. "Open a channel to all ships." The communications officer pressed several buttons. "Channel open, sir." Harris took a deep breath before speaking. His voice carried throughout every vessel in the fleet, reaching the ears of nearly 20,000 human beings. "This is Commodore Harris to all hands. In 14 hours, we will engage a hostile force that outnumbers us nearly 3-1. The species we are going to help has never asked anything of humanity before. They do not know us. Most of them probably fear us based on the stories they have heard. But when their world started dying, they sent out a call for help. That call went out to every civilization in the galaxy. Do you know how many answered?" He paused for a moment. "1. We are the only ones who answered. The Galactic Council declared neutrality. The Torvax Confederacy is hiding behind their borders. Every other species out there decided that the Valanthi were not worth the risk. But we are here. We are going." Harris turned to face the main view screen, even though he knew his words were being transmitted as audio only. "I will not lie to you. This is going to be ugly. Some of us will not come home. But I want every person in this fleet to understand something. We are not doing this for territory. We are not doing this for resources or political advantage. We are doing this because 800 million people cried out for help, and we were the only ones who cared enough to answer. He could feel the attention of his crew, hanging on every word. Humanity has made a lot of mistakes over the centuries. We have fought each other. We have done terrible things. But we have also done something that no other species in this galaxy seems capable of. We have decided that the suffering of strangers matters. We have decided that we will not stand by while innocent people burn. That is who we are. That is what makes us human. Harris straightened his uniform. All hands, prepare for combat. Check your equipment, say whatever prayers you need to say, and remember why we are here. We are going to save people today, whatever it costs, whatever it takes. We are going to show the universe what humanity is made of. Harris out. The channel closed. The bridge remained silent for several seconds. Katie Moore looked up from her console, her eyes slightly wet. Sir, we are receiving a transmission from the Galactic Council. They are demanding that we turn back. They say our intervention will destabilize the region and provoke further Kresh aggression. Harris almost laughed. The Council was worried about destabilizing the region while millions of people were being slaughtered. He had never had much respect for the Council, but this removed whatever small amount remained. Tell them that their message was received with severe signal interference and could not be understood. Then delete the recording. Yes, sir. Moore allowed herself a small smile as she typed the response. Lucas Grant moved closer to Harris and spoke quietly, so only the Commodore could hear. Daniel, you know the odds. Even if everything goes perfectly, we are looking at significant losses. Some of these people have families. Harris nodded slowly. So do the Valanthi, Lucas. So do the Valanthi. Grant said nothing more. There was nothing more to say. He returned to his tactical station and began preparing battle plans for a fight that should have been impossible to win. The fleet continued through hyperspace, engines burning hot, racing toward a world they had never seen to save a people they had never met. Because that was what humans did. Supreme Commander Varketh stood on the command platform of his flagship and observed the burning planet below with deep satisfaction. His massive body was covered in thick armored plates, and his compound eyes could see in multiple spectrums at once. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for a smile among the Kresh species. The conquest of Serath 7 was proceeding exactly as planned. The Valanthi had proven to be even weaker than his intelligence reports had suggested. Their military was laughable. Their technology was outdated. Their spirits had broken almost immediately once the bombardment began. In a few more days, the harvesting of survivors could begin in earnest. The slave markets were already anticipating the arrival of fresh workers. Supreme Commander, his sensor officer interrupted nervously. We are detecting hyperspace signatures on the edge of the system. Varketh turned his massive head toward the display screens. Reinforcements? Has the Council finally grown a spine? Unknown, Supreme Commander. The signatures are unusual, very fast approach vectors, faster than standard Council vessels. Before Varketh could respond, the first ship dropped out of hyperspace. It appeared suddenly, violently, like a stone thrown by an angry giant. The vessel was painted in dark colors that seemed to absorb the starlight around it. Then another ship appeared, then another. Within seconds, 12 vessels had materialized in a tight formation at the edge of the system. Identify them, Varketh demanded. The sensor officer's claws trembled as he worked his console. Cross-referencing with known vessel types now, Supreme Commander. He paused, and his voice dropped lower. They appear to be human vessels. The bridge fell silent. Every Kresh officer present had heard the stories about humans. They were a species that should not have survived, let alone achieved spaceflight. Their homeworld was classified as a Category 9 death world, a place so hostile that it was considered unsuitable for colonization by any civilized species. The gravity alone would crush a creche over time. The atmosphere was corrosive. The wildlife was nightmarish. And yet the humans had thrived there. They had evolved to become the apex predators of their planet. They consumed other creatures. They breathed the poison air. They survived injuries that would kill any other sentient being. They were the monsters that other monsters feared. "Hail them," Varketh ordered, forcing confidence into his voice. The communication channel opened, and the image of a human appeared on the screen. Varketh studied the creature with his compound eyes. It was smaller than a creche, with soft skin that offered no natural protection. Its eyes were forward-facing like a predator. It wore a uniform of dark blue and stood with a relaxed posture that suggested either confidence or madness. "This is Commodore Daniel Harris of the Human Expeditionary Fleet," the creature said. Its voice was calm and measured. "You are engaged in the unlawful invasion of a sovereign world and the genocide of its people. You have 1 hour to cease all hostile operations and withdraw your forces. Failure to comply will be considered an act of war against humanity and will be met with appropriate response." Varketh let out a harsh, chittering laugh. The sound echoed across his bridge as his officers joined in nervously. 12 ships against my armada? Human. I command 32 capital ships and over 100 support vessels. You are outnumbered 3 to 1 at minimum. Your courage is admirable, but your mathematics is poor. The human called Harris did not react to the laughter. His expression remained unchanged. "I have done the mathematics, Supreme Commander. I simply do not care about the numbers." "Then you are a fool. Withdraw now, and I will allow you to leave with your lives. This is not your concern. The Valanthi are not your allies. You gain nothing by dying here." Harris seemed to consider this for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. It was harder, colder, like metal scraping against stone. "I have read your history, Supreme Commander. 800 years of conquest, dozens of species enslaved or destroyed, and in all that time, you have never faced an enemy who was willing to fight back without counting the odds first. You have built your empire on fear and the weakness of others." The human leaned slightly forward. "Today, that changes. Today you meet humans. We are not afraid of you. We are not going to calculate whether the fight is worth it. Those people down there called for help, and we answered. That is all that matters to us." Varketh felt something cold move through his body. It was not quite fear, not yet, but it was the beginning of uncertainty. "You would sacrifice your ships and your crews for a species you have never met? That is insanity." "Maybe it is," Harris agreed. "But it is our kind of insanity. You have 59 minutes remaining." The channel closed. Varketh stared at the blank screen for several seconds. His tactical officer approached carefully. "Supreme Commander, should we take defensive positions?" "Against 12 ships?" Varketh forced another laugh, but it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "Maintain current formation. If the humans are foolish enough to attack, we will crush them and add their vessels to our collection. Perhaps their species will learn to fear us as well." But even as he gave the order, Varketh could not shake the image of the humans' eyes. They had not shown fear. They had not shown doubt. They had shown something that Varketh had never encountered in 800 years of Kresh dominance. They had shown certainty. On the surface of Serath 7, Ambassador Kelris huddled in an underground shelter with several hundred other survivors. A salvaged communication terminal displayed the exchange between the human fleet and the Kresh commander. The Valanthi watched in silence, their translucent skin shifting through various colors of emotion. "They are mad," Elder Morath whispered. 12 ships against an armada. They will be destroyed." Kelris shook his head slowly. "Perhaps. But did you see the human's face? He was not afraid. He knew exactly what he was facing, and he did not care. Young Torin, the soldier who had warned them about the Kresh breakthrough, stared at the screen with wide eyes. Why would they do this? We are strangers to them. We have nothing to offer. I do not know, Kelris admitted, but I am beginning to understand something about humans. They do not think like we do. They do not think like the Council or the Confederacy or any other species we have encountered. They see suffering, and they cannot ignore it. Even when ignoring it would be the logical choice. The hour passed slowly in the shelter. Every minute felt like an eternity. The Valanthi listened for any sound from above, any indication of what was happening in the space around their wounded world. When the hour ended, there was a moment of absolute silence. Then the shelter shook as explosions began to light up the sky. The humans had not withdrawn. The humans had attacked. Kelris closed his eyes and listened to the distant thunder of battle. He did not know if the humans could win. He did not know if any of them would survive the day. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Deathworlders had come, and they had come fighting. Whatever happened next would change the galaxy forever. The countdown reached 0. The Kresh fleet had not moved. Supreme Commander Varketh had called their bluff, certain that no sane species would attack against such overwhelming odds. He had forgotten that humans were not entirely sane. Commodore Harris watched the last seconds tick away on his display. When the clock hit 0, he felt a strange peace settle over him. They had given the enemy a chance to withdraw. That chance had been refused. Whatever happened next was on the Kresh. All ships, Harris announced calmly. Execute attack pattern Delta 7. Weapons free. The human fleet surged forward like a pack of wolves descending on prey. The destroyers moved first, their engines burning bright as they accelerated toward the enemy formation, their railguns charged with electromagnetic energy, preparing to fire projectiles made of solid tungsten at velocities that defied imagination. When those projectiles hit their targets, they would release more energy than most species put into their largest weapons. The first Kresh cruiser never saw what killed it. A railgun slug traveling at 15 kilometers per second struck the vessel amidships. The impact transferred so much energy that the cruiser simply came apart, its hull torn open like paper, its reactor breaching in a secondary explosion that consumed everything nearby. Direct hit, Commander Grant reported, his voice steady despite the chaos beginning around them. Enemy cruiser destroyed. Harris nodded. Continue the advance. Do not let them recover. The Kresh were scrambling to respond. Their formation had been designed to maintain a siege, not to defend against a sudden aggressive assault. Officers shouted orders. Ships tried to turn and bring their weapons to bear, but the humans were already among them. The frigates danced between the larger vessels, moving too fast for the Kresh targeting systems to track effectively. They launched missiles that split apart in flight, each warhead seeking a different target. Explosions blossomed across the Kresh line like deadly flowers. Lieutenant Amy Chen led the first fighter squadron out of the carrier's launch bay. Her call sign was Ghost, earned from her habit of appearing exactly where enemies least expected her. She was 34 years old, divorced, with no children. Her entire life was the Navy, and she would not have had it any other way. Ghost Squadron, she announced over the tactical channel. Weapons hot. Stay tight, watch your wingmen, and do not let these bastards get a clean shot. The fighters poured out of the Relentless in waves. 300 small craft, each one carrying a pilot who had volunteered for this mission, knowing the odds were roughly 50-50 for survival. They dove into the Kresh formation without hesitation, their weapons blazing. On the bridge of his flagship, Supreme Commander Varketh watched his tactical display in growing horror. Red icons representing his own ships were disappearing faster than he could track. The humans were not fighting like any enemy he had ever faced. They did not form defensive lines. They did not engage in the careful positioning that characterized space combat among civilized species. They simply attacked with a ferocity that seemed to border on madness. "They are not slowing down," his sensor officer reported, his voice climbing toward panic. "They are accelerating into our formation." Varketh could not understand it. The humans were taking damage. He could see their ships absorbing hits that would cripple vessels of other species. But they kept coming. They kept fighting. It was as if they did not care about their own survival. The destroyer Valiant took a direct hit to its engine section from a Kresh beam weapon. The ship spun away from the battle, trailing fire and debris. But before it went dark, its railguns fired one last salvo, destroying 2 enemy frigates. The frigate Swift found itself caught in a crossfire between 3 Kresh cruisers. There was no escape. Captain Roger Coleman ordered his crew to abandon ship, then pointed his vessel at the nearest enemy and pushed the engines to maximum. The collision destroyed both ships in a flash of light and radiation. Harris watched the Swift disappear from his display. He had known Roger for 15 years. They had served together on the outer colonies. Roger had a wife and 2 sons back on Mars. "Commodore," Katie Moore said quietly, "the Valiant is requesting permission to withdraw. They have lost main propulsion and are venting atmosphere." "Granted. Get them clear of the battle zone." Harris turned to Grant. "Status of the cruiser group. Defiance, Valor, and Thunder are engaging the enemy flagship group. Heavy resistance, but holding their own. The Kresh are starting to concentrate their fire on the Defiance." The heavy cruiser Defiance was taking the worst of it. Her captain, Nathan Brooks, was a man who had grown up in the industrial districts of Detroit, working in factories until he earned a scholarship to the Naval Academy. He had risen through the ranks on pure skill and determination. Now he stood on his bridge as damage reports flooded in from every section of his ship. "Hull breach on decks 7 through 12. Fire suppression teams to engineering. Medical teams to forward compartments." Brooks listened to the reports with calm focus. His ship was dying around him, but his crew was still fighting. That was what mattered. "Captain," his first officer shouted over the alarms, "we have lost 40% of our weapon systems. Propulsion is failing. We cannot maintain this engagement much longer." Brooks looked at his tactical display. The Defiance was surrounded by enemy vessels, but directly ahead was a Kresh dreadnought. It was one of their largest ships, a command vessel that coordinated their fleet operations. If it went down, the Kresh formation would lose cohesion. "How many crew can we evacuate in the next 5 minutes?" Brooks asked. His first officer understood immediately. Her face went pale. "Captain, no. That is an order, Commander. Begin evacuation of all non-essential personnel. I want as many people in life pods as possible. Sir, the escape pods will be vulnerable to enemy fire." "Not if the enemy is too busy dealing with us." Brooks smiled grimly. "Get our people out. I will handle the rest." The evacuation began immediately. Crew members ran through damaged corridors toward the life pod bays. Some were injured, some were carrying wounded comrades, but they moved with the efficiency of people who had trained for exactly this situation. Brooks waited until the evacuation was nearly complete. Then he ordered his remaining crew to the pods and took manual control of the Defiance. The ship responded sluggishly, its systems failing, but it still had enough power to do what needed to be done. He aimed directly at the Kresh dreadnought and pushed the engines to maximum. "For Earth," he said quietly, "for everyone you killed. See you in hell." The Defiance struck the dreadnought at full speed. Both ships vanished in a fusion explosion that temporarily outshone the local star. When the light faded, there was nothing left but expanding debris and radiation. Supreme Commander Varketh was aboard that dreadnought. The Kresh fleet had just lost its leader. On the bridge of the Relentless, Harris watched the explosion with a mixture of grief and grim satisfaction. Nathan Brooks had just changed the entire battle with a single act of sacrifice. The Kresh formation was falling into chaos as individual captains tried to take command and failed to coordinate. "All ships," Harris announced. "Press the attack. They are breaking. Do not let them recover." The remaining human vessels surged forward into the confused enemy fleet. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned. The Deathworlders of Earth had proven that they were willing to fight, to bleed, and to die for people they had never met. And the Kresh were learning what that meant. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was finally over, the space around Sarath 7 was filled with debris and the fading glow of destroyed vessels. The Kresh Dominion had lost 23 capital ships, 64 support vessels, and over 100,000 soldiers. Their supreme commander was dead, his flagship reduced to scattered atoms by the sacrifice of the Defiance. The survivors had fled into hyperspace, their engines burning at maximum as they raced away from the nightmare they had encountered. Before they vanished, some of them managed to send transmissions back to the Kresh homeworld. The messages were fragmented and filled with static, but the meaning was clear. Stay away from the Deathworlders. Stay away from humanity. They are not like the others. They do not fear death. They do not count costs. They simply fight until there is nothing left to fight. The human fleet had paid dearly for their victory. 4 ships destroyed, including the Defiance and the Swift. 3 more vessels were badly damaged and would need months of repairs before they could fly again. Over 2,000 human beings had died in those 6 hours, their bodies scattered among the stars they had come to defend. Commodore Daniel Harris stood on the bridge of the Relentless and looked out at what remained of his fleet. His face was pale with exhaustion, and his uniform was stained with sweat from the hours of tension. But his eyes were steady. They had done what they came to do. The Volanthe would survive. "Lieutenant Moore," he said quietly, "open a channel to the surface." The communication systems hummed to life, searching for anyone still able to receive transmissions on the planet below. After a few moments, a connection was established. The image that appeared on the screen was Ambassador Kelris. The Volanthe leader looked different than he had in the distress transmission. His translucent skin was no longer the dark purple of despair. It flickered through multiple colors that Harris could not interpret, but something in the alien's posture suggested overwhelming emotion. "Commodore Harris," Kelris said. His voice was thick, and he seemed to struggle for words. "I do not know what to say. In our language, there is no concept for what you have done today. You came when no one else would. You fought for people you had never met. You died for us." Harris nodded slowly. He thought about Nathan Brooks, about Roger Coleman, about all the others who would never go home. "It is what we do, Ambassador. Humanity has its flaws. We are aggressive. We are stubborn. We have fought wars among ourselves that nearly destroyed our species. But we have never been able to stand by while innocent people suffer. It is just not in our nature." "Your losses were terrible," Kelris said. "Your ships, your people. We can never repay such a debt." "There is no debt to repay." Harris managed a tired smile. "We did not come here for payment. We did not come for gratitude. We came because you needed help and no one else would give it. That is enough for us." Kelris was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was barely a whisper. "The Galactic Council told us that humans were dangerous. They said you were aggressive and violent and unpredictable. They called you Deathworlders, monsters from a nightmare planet. They warned us to stay away from you." "They were not entirely wrong," Harris admitted. "We are all of those things." "No, Commodore." Kelris straightened, his colors settling into something warm and bright that Harris somehow understood as respect and gratitude. "They were wrong about what matters. You are not monsters. You are protectors. You are warriors who fight for those who cannot fight for themselves." You are exactly what this galaxy needed and never knew it had." Harris felt something tighten in his chest. He thought about Emma, his daughter back on Earth. Someday he would tell her about this day. He would tell her that when the universe cried out for help, humanity answered. That her father and thousands of others had traveled across the stars to save strangers simply because it was the right thing to do. "Thank you, Ambassador," he said quietly. "That means more than you know." On the surface of Sarath 7, the surviving Velanthi began to emerge from their shelters. They climbed out of underground bunkers and walked through the ruins of their cities, looking up at the sky. The Kresh warships were gone. In their place, human vessels maintained orbit above their wounded world, standing guard against any threat that might return. Elder Morath walked beside Kelris through the streets of what had once been their capital city. The destruction was devastating, but already Velanthi were beginning to organize recovery efforts. They cleared rubble. They tended to the wounded. They counted their dead and mourned together. "How many survived?" Morath asked. "We are still counting," Kelris replied. "Perhaps 400 million. Half of what we had, but half is more than none. Half is a future. Half is hope." Morath looked up at the human ships in orbit. "What happens now?" "Will they leave?" As if in answer to her question, new signals began appearing on the orbital sensors. More human ships were arriving, but these were not warships. They were transport vessels, cargo carriers, medical frigates. They came loaded with supplies, equipment, and volunteers ready to help rebuild what the Kresh had destroyed. The first human relief shuttle landed 2 hours later. The hatch opened, and humans walked onto Velanthi soil for the first time in history. They brought food and medicine and tools. They brought doctors who immediately began treating the wounded regardless of species. They brought engineers who started assessing the damage and planning repairs. A young human woman approached Kelris. She had brown hair tied back in a practical ponytail and wore the uniform of a medical officer. "Ambassador Kelris, I am Dr. Susan Park. I have been assigned as the primary liaison between our relief forces and your government. What do you need most urgently?" Kelris stared at her for a moment, struggling to process what was happening. These people had just fought a battle against impossible odds. They had lost thousands of their own kind, and now they were asking how they could help more. "Medical supplies," he finally managed to say. "Clean water. Temporary shelters for the refugees. We have hundreds of thousands of people with nowhere to go." Dr. Park nodded crisply. "We brought all of that. My teams will start setting up field hospitals within the hour. We have water purification units and prefabricated shelters on the cargo ships. Is there anything else?" "Why?" Kelris asked suddenly. The question had been burning in his mind since the first human transmission. "Why do you do this? Why risk so much for strangers?" Susan Park paused and considered the question carefully. "Because we remember what it was like to suffer alone. Human history is full of terrible things, Ambassador. Wars and famines and disasters where people died because no one came to help. We swore that we would be different. When we reached the stars, we decided that we would be the help that we had always wished someone would send us." She smiled, and for a moment Kelris saw something ancient and fierce behind her gentle expression. "Besides," she added, "that is what makes us human. Not our strength or our technology or our Deathworlder biology. It is the simple fact that we refuse to ignore suffering when we have the power to stop it. That is who we are." The Galactic Council issued a formal protest about human intervention in what they called an internal Kresh matter. Humanity responded by ignoring them completely. The Kresh Dominion demanded reparations for their losses. Humanity told them exactly where they could put their demands. Within a year, the Velanthi had become humanity's closest allies. Ambassador Kelris traveled to Earth and addressed the United Nations, describing what the humans had done for his people. His speech was broadcast across the galaxy, changing how countless species viewed the aggressive Deathworlders from the poison planet. Humanity was not the monster the universe had feared. They were the monster that protected those who could not protect themselves, and the galaxy would never forget it.